Hi everybody, this is Johnny. I'll be giving an overview of Literacy Assessment Task 3, Assessing Students' Literacy Learning. Let's start with what do I need to think about. In Literacy Assessment Task 3, you will analyze both student learning and student use of language. Before you begin the analysis, you need to think about the following. How will you gather evidence and make sense of what students have learned? This is all about assessment here, so what kinds of informal and formal assessments might you involve in your lessons? How will you provide meaningful feedback? This is both oral feedback, talking through kids about their workings and their ideas, and also written feedback on their assignments or writing. How will you use evidence of what students know and are able to do to plan next steps in instruction? So planning next steps in instruction is actually one of the rubrics, so you need to make sure you do that well. How will you identify evidence of and explain students' use of language that demonstrates development of content understanding? So the things that matter a lot here is the evidence you gather, because that's how you're going to justify the quality of the teaching and what kids have learned. And you're going to be recording and organizing students' work in some way that you can present in a table or a chart. So do look at the commentary piece, the assessment commentary. So you want to gather evidence in a way that you can organize it, and you want to gather evidence that's specific to your learning objectives. Meaning feedback is going to be one of the rubrics as well. And as I said, feedback can be both written or oral. And how we use evidence of what students know and are able to do to plan next steps. This is actually one of the rubrics is focused specifically on next steps, so do give good attention to that. So what do I need to do? Select one assessment from your learning segment you will use to evaluate your students' developing knowledge and skills. It should be an assessment that is completed by the whole class, featured in the learning segment. If you're teaching only a group within the class for the learning segment, that group will be the whole class. The assessment should reflect the work of individuals, not groups, but may be individual work from a group task. The assessment should provide opportunities for students to demonstrate, and these are the most important things. The two things you care about throughout this TPA is the essential literacy strategy and the related skills that matter to that essential literacy strategy. So you want to set out evaluation criteria. Now what's good about the evaluation criteria is that's what you're going to be using to measure kids' understanding. So you want to make sure you have that clearly set out about something in their reading or something in their writing that you can show and demonstrate that they've learned something from what you've given them in your learning segment. So define and submit the evaluation criteria you will use to analyze student learning related to the learning literacy understandings described above. Then you want to collect and analyze your students' work from the selected assessment to identify quantitative and qualitative patterns of learning within and across learners in the class. You may submit text files with scanned student work or, for oral assessments, of primary grade students. So examples, reading aloud, dictating text, or orally demonstrating the essential literacy strategy, a video or audio file. Note that the oral assessment must be given to the whole class, though not necessarily at the same time. For each focused student, a video or audio work sample must be no more than 5 minutes in total running time. So that's an option here. Some important things here. This one is the most important thing. When you're analyzing the student's work, you want to be looking for patterns of learning. Patterns of learning is significant to one of the rubrics. So you want to see not just what each kid has been doing, how well they've met the learning objectives, but are there patterns across the students about what they did understand and what your teaching did to help them understand? Or are there things where they're still a little stuck? And do they have some common patterns across their misunderstandings? Next, a significant part of this is about having focused students. So let's read. Select three student work samples that represent the patterns of learning, again, patterns of learning, i.e. what individuals or groups generally understood and what a number of students were still struggling to understand, you identified in your assessment analysis. These students will be your focus students. There's going to be 3 of them for this task. At least one of the focus students must have an identified learning need that's described in the learning commentary, in the assessment commentary. For example, could be an English learner, student with an IEP, student on a 504 plan, struggling reader, underperforming student, students with gaps in academic knowledge, or some student who needs to be a bit more challenged. So you have lots of choices here. Okay? 3 students will be your focus students, and you want some variety in who they are. And you can see the description here about what kinds of students would best serve to be focus students. Next piece, you want to document the feedback you gave to each of the 3 focus students. So feedback is about the focus students on the work sample itself as an audio clip or as a video clip. Okay, so there's 3 different choices here. You can give feedback on the work sample itself. You can have an audio clip where you're talking with kids in a group, or you're talking to kids and having individual interviews. You can imagine that you're talking over something they've written for composing text, and you're having a conversation, giving feedback. Or it could be within the video clips you're already sharing under the instructional piece, where you have working with some kids and the video records you having a conversation. Now what's important here is that when you're doing the video recording, you should have somebody moving around with your camera so that you can get in close for those conversations. Sometimes people will record their lessons and they'll have the camera in one corner of the room and they're recording the whole class, and the teacher goes to some kid in some corner and has a really great conversation about their work, but the camera wasn't there. It's too far away and there's no way to collect the audio. It's good to have a fellow student teacher or your mentor teacher or somebody else come with you around the room when you're doing individual conferences with kids so that you can get this feedback. So this follows. If you submit a work sample or feedback as a video or audio clip and comments made by you or your focus students cannot be heard, do one of the following. 1, you can attach a transcription of the inaudible comments, no more than 2 additional pages, to the end of the literacy assessment commentary. 2, you could embed quotes with timestamp references in the commentary response. Or 3, insert captions in the video. Captions for this purpose will be considered permissible editing. If you submit a student work sample or feedback as a video or audio clip and additional students are present, you need to be clear about who's who. Clearly identify which students are your focus students in the relevant prompts, 1D and 2A, of the literacy assessment commentary in no more than 2 sentences, just so that the reviewer knows who you're talking about. Respond to the prompts listed in the literacy assessment commentary section below after analyzing student work from the selected assessment. Include and submit the chosen assessment, including the directions prompts provided to students. Attach the assessment, no more than 5 additional pages, to the end of the literacy assessment commentary. Provide evidence of students' understanding and use of the targeted academic language function and other language demands. This is a big part of this one. You have to say something about how they manage the language function, vocabulary, discourse, syntax. You may choose evidence from video clips submitted in Literacy Instruction Task 2, an additional video clip of one or more students using language within the learning segment, no more than 5 minutes in length, and/or student work samples submitted in Literacy Assessment Task 3. So there's a bit more here because there's a lot of evidence that needs to be added to this. So let's take a look at that. Let me make this so you can see it. Okay. So Part A, student literacy work samples. You can see that they need to be in written form or audio form or video form. And you can see the number of files possible, no page limit, And then for the audio or work samples, only 5 minutes allowed. And you can see some more description over here. This is evidence of feedback. And you can include video evidence of academic language use if you want. Written feedback you can do in a doc form. You can see audio form for the feedback or video form for the feedback as well. You may have up to 4 files. No page limit, but then there's a limit on the number of minutes for the audio feedback and a number of limits for the video feedback, and they're different from each other. There are more descriptors here. There's a lot to this one. There's one more page. And on this one, you can see that the literacy assessment commentary needs to be completed, and you can see what form. There's 1 page, no more than 10 pages possible. Okay? And so let's go back up here. This is the last piece, and this is a review of what you need to be doing for Literacy Assessment Task 3. First thing is you need to select one assessment from the learning segment that you will use to evaluate your students' developing knowledge and skills. Attach the assessment used to evaluate student performance to the end of the assessment commentary. So this is the one that you'll be measuring and making a table about and commenting on. So you want to have a really solid assessment that is rich in the possibilities for kids to express ideas. If it's a two-dimensional one where the focus is mostly on spelling or sounding out something, you're not going to have enough information to really get at what an essential literacy strategy or related skills should be for a learning segment of 3 to 5 lessons. So give yourself something good for the assessment. Define and submit the evaluation criteria you will use to analyze student learning. Okay, so that's pretty plain, evaluation criteria. And you want to collect and analyze student work from the selected assessment to identify quantitative and qualitative patterns of learning within and across the learners in the class. Again, you want to select 3 student work samples. And I emphasized before, patterns of learning within and across the learners in the class. At least one of the samples must be from a student with specific learning needs. These 3 students will be your focus students. You want to summarize the learning of the whole class, referring to work samples from the 3 focus students to illustrate patterns in student understanding across the class. This one's about whole class. As much as you care about the 3 focus students, you also have to say what happened across the class. You have to submit feedback for the work samples for the 3 focus students, and you have choices, written, audio, or video. You want to analyze evidence of students' language use from the video clips from Literacy Instruction Task 2. You also can have an additional video clip of 1 or more students using language within the learning segment, and or the student work samples from Literacy Assessment Task 3. You're probably going to want to have 2 of these at least. One is evidence from the videos for Instruction Task 2, but also from the students' work samples. And lastly, analyze evidence of student learning and plan for next steps by responding to commentary prompts. So that's the last piece. Each one of these tasks has a commentary section, so you want to do that part well. So this was comment on Literacy Assessment Task 3, Assessing Students' Literacy Learning. I hope that it's helped you and it will help you in doing well by this.